mind, I was very pleased Psychic News published it, and they are, you could say, the sort of the medium's journal, certainly in Britain.
Okay.
So the first one was Dante. Tolstoy was the second one. And then the third one was Sir Francis Bacon.
The Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence, where politics is not the answer, materialism counts for nothing, and spirituality will set you free.
Richard.
Hey, Darren.
So I think we've got an incredible story that we've got on our table here today. Something that appeared in Psychic News in 2015, certainly one of the most prestigious psychic journals that there are. And the reason I found this so fascinating, I mean, first of all, I'll say we're kind of on a psychic track now, so I want to go down this line.
Right.
Especially with you. It's not just the fact that it's channeling, and it's not even, the claim about who you channeled. It's what they channeled that I find so fascinating in this case, particularly given that our focus on the Spiritual Freedom Show is obviously the teachings of the 9 freedoms.
Yeah.
So maybe you can kick us off a little bit here in terms of these messages that were published in this magazine that you received.
Yeah, so what had happened already was that I'd started to get messages from writers. And that was a plan that was devised on the other realms, not by me. It's interesting, William Blake, poet, said that he had more books in print and available on the higher spheres than he had here, which he didn't have any then. He has a lot of his poetry is obviously readily available now.
Okay, yeah.
In the 18th century, he said that. So. But coming to this, these writers that were published here in Psychic News were like the climax, the kernel, you might say, of that. I mean, now this is a very controversial claim, I suppose. I am not saying everyone has to believe me. I don't mind. I was very pleased Psychic News published it, and they published it very straight. And they are, you could say, the sort of the medium's journal, certainly in Britain.
Okay.
So that was good. I would also say that this project, which was started, I would say about maybe almost 10 years before this, or 8 or 9 years before this, which culminated in my book, God's Guides and Guardian Angels, was a very clever idea. It wasn't my idea, because if, for example, you channel a poem, it has to rhyme, or no, it doesn't have to rhyme, actually, but some poems rhyme, some poems have meter.
Right.
And so, therefore, you can't fabricate it in sort of 3 minutes flat.
Yeah.
So it was absolute proof to me. I mean, people, as I say, can doubt my word. That's up to them. I don't really care, to be honest. But I knew. And also the caliber. I mean, I wouldn't claim to be able to write the sort of things here that were published in Psychic News. First of all, I'd say that all these 3, though, are studying the 9 freedoms, which makes it very relevant to Spiritual Freedom shows, because this is something Dr. King said, actually. The 9 freedoms is being studied on the higher realms more deeply than most people are capable of on this realm. And these 3 writers were studying it, and they gave me these 3 pieces about different freedoms. So the first one was Dante, who gave me something which is related to bravery, the first.
And when we say Dante, we mean Dante of...
Dante Alighieri. There is a poem actually in God's Guides and Guardian Angels by Dante. I don't give his name in the book.
I see.
I should have done. I was advised to. Everybody thought, a lot of people thought I was making a mistake in not, but I'm very conservative, not very good about coming forward with claims that relate to myself.
Okay.
But then I realized this isn't really about myself. This is some beautiful pieces of literature of which I wouldn't be capable. And they are about the 9 freedoms, or aspects of the 9 freedoms from their perspective. So yes, so Dante was about bravery, his piece that he gave me. The Tolstoy one was, Tolstoy was the second one. That was about the second freedom, love. They weren't actually given in this order.
I see,
And then the third one was Sir Francis Bacon. Now, Sir Francis Bacon isn't particularly regarded in literary circles, except that I personally believe, and Dr. King absolutely stated, that he was the main author, not the only one, but the main one in Shakespeare.
Oh, that's a revelation itself, isn't it?
Yes, so that's a massive thing. And I had, lots of evidence, from things he'd written me that appeared in lines from Shakespeare that I hadn't seen in other messages and so forth. So These are three of the greatest writers ever. So I realize this is a very controversial claim, but I think it's a very clever plan. I don't think it's in deference to me at all. I think it's mainly probably in deference to Dr. George King, who all three of these admire greatly, and in deference to the 9 freedoms.
So you're talking about kind of this plan. I mean, it seems like one aspect of this is sort of like, if you could prove that channeling was possible, if we could give credibility to that in itself, and that people could see that Dr. King, therefore, was also able to channel, and that he was able to channel things like the 9 freedoms from Mars Sector 6, this kind of helps to round out people's understanding of how.
I think that's part of their plan as well, that if people can see channeling working,
right,
they can see the merit in what I receive because it's in a beautiful literary style, for example. I mean, if you take the Tolstoy one, which is called, I gave the titles to them,
okay,
but it's called The Lion and the Lamb.
Okay.
I was very surprised. My conscious mind was very surprised. Now, I want to stress here, I didn't receive these in samadhic trance, like Dr. King received the 9 freedoms. I wasn't capable of it at that time. But it was a very difficult enterprise as far as I was concerned, because
effort-wise, you mean?
Effort-wise, concentration-wise, consciousness-wise, because one of the keys to mediumship, as Dr. King, I think almost uniquely has revealed, actually, that might be wrong, but I don't hear this too often. When you are receiving a message from an intelligence, now these intelligences are not ascended, these people, they're on a higher realm, very high realm, I would suggest. But they're not ascended, so they're human beings, they're not interplanetary, they're not ascended masters, but they're advanced people and brilliant writers. It may not be, by the way, that this is like the last life they had. For all I know, they might have reincarnated in the meantime.
I see.
In fact, in one particular case, I believe they have for sure. That's my opinion. But in delivering this, they resumed their personas as these 3 writers, because that's how they're known.
It's identifiable
by most people
by us
on Earth.
I get it. Okay.
So to gain that rapport, though, the key of mediumship is while you're receiving a message, you have to be at the similar vibratory level, frame of mind, if you want to call it that, as the person who's communicating. So Dr. King entered Samadhi, and in Samadhi, then a being like Jesus, a being like Mars Sector 6 could use him, because he's elevated his consciousness so high, far higher than I did in these cases, that these great cosmic intelligences could use him. So this is a lowly thing by comparison, but still, because they are on a high realm, for me, it was a big effort. I had to keep maintain a certain level. Mediums, if they say that it's like falling off a log. Actually, I wrote an article in Psychic News around it.
Oh, yeah.
And I say this: some psychics and mediums talk about channeling as though it was as easy as falling off a log. For me, it would be more like an exercise in advanced forestry. I think that says something about the caliber of some of those mediums and their genuineness, frankly. If they think it's easy, either they're not getting a very elevated intelligence at all, or they are deluded, or worse, even lying. Let's hope they're not lying. But to do this isn't easy, and particularly when you're trying to gain this rapport with people who, as they give it to you. Now, with the Tolstoy one, I'm not a literary expert. You know, I did A-level English, and I did study drama at university, but I'm not. You know, I don't know much about Tolstoy. I don't think I've ever finished a book. I started one, but not finished one. Sorry. But in my mind, Tolstoy was, wrote about 19th century grand houses and noble families and so forth. So to get this thing, which was sort of almost zoological, what my conscious mind was saying, this can't be Tolstoy. Then later, afterwards, I found that he had written a thing called Stories from Zoology.
Really?
He'd written some sort of parables using animals.
Wow, so it's like an aspect of him that's not as famous, but which is he's drawing on.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know how,
which you didn't know?
I didn't know. Yeah. I think it may have been for children, I'm not sure, but or maybe, but even so, it was, I think very relevant to adults as well.
So he's adopting a style that he did use while he was.
It seems to be. It's certainly a sort of subject matter.
Okay.
Because this is a parable. With Dante, there was a very clear prophecy made in the message that he gave me. And I'm going to look at my notes here. It was delivered to me on February the 4th, 2013. So it's kind of a call to arms. I've called it the currency of truth, but that's just my name for it. But he made a statement here, which was proved later within days. Within a week of this, Pope Benedict XVI, which is the one before the current one, took the world by surprise by resigning his papacy. And he thereby manifested the words Dante had spoken a few days earlier. Now, I put those words up on my website so I can prove I got them. And in it, he said, "Strike from the register all titles, be they even from the pontificate."
Wow.
And within days of that, the Pope resigned his position.
Wow.
Now, what's even more interesting, I discovered looking into it, that the last Pope who resigned, because popes weren't meant to resign, resigned for personal reasons, inverted commas, which is quite similar to Benedict, actually. He's called Celestine V, during Dante's lifetime. That's the last time it ever happened.
Wow.
And in the Inferno, Dante roundly condemned that Pope for resigning and citing cowardice. Now, he was in real trouble for that. In fact, his life would have been in danger had he gone anywhere near Rome after writing that.
After writing that, yeah.
But that's kind of an interesting tie.
Absolutely, the tie in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to get into reading these in a moment, but I thought I'd just ask, just before we get into it, a little bit more about, what's your experience like when you receive, maybe even receiving one of these specifically? Just to give people a flavor of, as someone who has started to develop these psychic abilities, as people can.
Yeah.
What's actually going on?
Well, it's intense for me when I was doing it, and it's not somatic. So if you can enter somatic trance, like Dr. King did, you bypass conscious thought, which is very interesting because it meant that Dr. King, as we've discussed before, couldn't remember or didn't know what had been said. Because if the thought process was superseded, you're in a transcendental state. By the way, transcendental meditation, as most people understand it, isn't transcendental in the strict sense. It might be helping people a lot.
Yes.
I'm not in any way saying anything against it. And likewise, people who talk about living in the now and simply mean you don't think about the past much, you don't think about the future much, and you just live for the moment, inverted commas, aren't actually in the now. Because I believe being in the now is samadhic. In fact, I'm sure of that. I'm absolutely certain of that.
We'll do a show on that. There's a good topic there, I think.
There's a topic there because a lot of talk about the power of now and so forth. But getting back to this, for me, it's raising my consciousness, keeping it there, and although I'm not in a trance, or wasn't then in a trance, it's not thinking about what is being said at all. Soon as you allow your mind, and this is where so many mediums go wrong, and this is why so many of them are at best partially accurate.
Okay.
And usually they're at best they are partially accurate. To get it really accurate, you can't think about what is being said at all. All you're thinking about is receiving the communication, which in my case is telepathic and clairaudient.
Okay.
And they have a way of, I don't know whether all these three gentlemen speak English now. I suspect they do. If they don't, they have a way of kind of instantly translating it by the time it reaches me.
You're hearing English words, you're saying?
I'm hearing and receiving English words.
Okay.
And of course, this is the other thing about what I'm doing, or what I was guided to do in this sort of literary project, which lasted for about 10 years and culminated, I'd say, with these three messages. I was guided to receive literary figures, and they very kindly cooperated. As I say, not in deference to me, I don't think, but in deference to Dr. King, the Aetheric Society, what I'm doing, the 9 freedoms, and so forth. And so it's clever because the words they use, for example, when I got one poem, which was from Fuke Greville and William Davenant, which is published in God's Guides and Guardian Angels. Those two are 17th century figures I'd never heard of when I received this message from them, all of which is good for me, because then I think, oh gosh, they exist.
I see.
It's if you lack confidence, and I have lacked confidence, and when I started, I'm questioning myself, and I advise all psychics and mediums to question themselves. I had one very interesting message actually when I was just starting out, and Dr. George King himself set me up as a psychic, and he even designed the cover for my crystal ball personally. Dr. King designed it himself, and he bought me the crystal ball.
Wow, okay.
And I was doing a lot of readings in those days, like I was booked over a year ahead, and I was doing this, and I was getting help from various people, but I still lacked confidence. And what I think at the very beginning, some of the people connected to Dr. King in the earlier days were helping me, and connected to the Aetheric Society. So one would be Sir James Young Simpson.
Okay.
And I got something, and afterwards, because he was a very witty man, and this is slightly offensive to vegetarians and vegans, so forgive me, but when I'd finished, he gave me a typical steak order.
What do you mean?
Because I was thinking, I wonder if I got that right, and he said, this is what he said, rare, medium, well done.
That's so clever.
And,
so clever.
If you're getting a joke, you can't really fake it, because you can't crack a joke, psychically, as it were. So that's an aside. But I think it's quite healthy, though, to question yourself and so on, and to stay on edge and not get carried away. It's very easy to get carried. In fact, I got a bit carried away at the beginning when I started, and you can easily, because your imagination can kick in. So coming back to what you asked, you have to, as far as I'm concerned anyway, make a big effort. I even sometimes break down the letters. I don't even hear the word. I get the letters, So I'll get Lion. And I'm not even thinking what that adds up to.
I see. It's literally just like as if it was just...
lion. But I'm thinking,
You're not thinking lion.
No.
You don't even have the thought of lion.
No, that's what you want to avoid. That. You want to thought, is this good? Does it rhyme? You can't, once you do that, you're finished.
I see.
You're no longer channeling.
Yeah, I get it.
Best you're collaborating.
Okay. So, because there have been some people who, it has been a collaboration, hasn't it?
Of course. I mean, I think Alice Bailey talks about that too. But I think myself, with all due deference to her, that it's much better if you can distinguish between your part and the communicator's part. And that's one thing I slightly... It's not my favourite thing about some of the Alice Bailey writings, is that some bits you don't know whether this is Dwal Kul or whether it's her. And she may not know. She probably didn't know. Because I think she wrongly frowned upon mediumship. I can see why she did.
I see.
Because there was a lot of nonsense around, and there still is a lot of nonsense around, but in its purest form, if you can hone it down, take yourself out the picture, and just get the message. And as I keep repeating, if you can enter somatic trance, that would be the very best way to do it, because you guarantee it then. And this is why you can't remember it, because your thoughts haven't been activated. So it can't go in the memory banks. Yeah,
that's the brilliant thing about the 9 Freedoms, isn't it? It's like, that's Mars Sector 6, and that's the Master's commentary on...
Yeah, and sometimes, I believe, just occasionally, Dr. King's commentary on Mars Sector 6 or the Master Jesus isn't exactly what that communicator meant. It's not wrong ever, because it's Dr. King. And sometimes even he will give different commentaries himself. But all this kind of adds to the authenticity, really, of Dr. King, because this isn't him. This is him looking at another communicator. And he, by and large, I think especially with Mars Sector 6, he's completely in tune with the thinking of that particular master. And then he, Dr. King, will throw brand new light on it. I mean, some of the things in the 9 Freedoms would have just passed us by without the commentaries of Dr. King. But they are two different contributions to truth.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about it, even the detaching to the level of only getting the letters when you're doing this. Yeah,
I mean, I've had a message before now which I haven't agreed with.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you should be able to do that.
I see, that level of detachment from the message.
And even for budding psychics who are not yet channeling or may never channel. You don't have to channel. In fact, probably most people shouldn't. They should spend time healing or something else. But for me, it was something I but I felt I had to do it. But it's not for everybody, and it doesn't need to be for most people. But even a budding psychic can get a feeling, and that feeling could be fear-driven, not psychically driven. Sometimes they feel, I don't like this. I've got a feeling this isn't right. That it might be their fear, it might be their conditioning, it might be doubt, it might be an emotional thing. But point being, sometimes if you get a feeling and you don't really agree with it, you don't really like it, that can be the most genuine feeling sometimes of all.
So I'd love to get into some of these poems and read them. Would you mind reading that first one? So this is Dante speaking. Is it talking about?
Yeah, this is Dante.
Okay.
And he gave me this on the 4th of February 2013, and I called it The Currency of Truth, but I probably should have called it Bravery, really.
Okay.
Smite hard the boulder of certainty, which blocks the way to clarity and truth. Unveil the cloth of dogma, which covers the rose-petaled knowledge of the seer. Cast aside these obstacles which have been constructed and woven from the lowest realms of earth. For now the time of revelation is here, and no man can stop this. The starched collars and velvet robes have no value in this currency of truth. Nor so do dusty parchment scrolls bearing seals of office of prominence and power. For prominence and power themselves are dust in this noble currency. Strike from the register all titles, be they even from the pontificate. For such have no value here where this light does shine. Mea culpa, for I too have drunk this poison. But now I am refreshed by the cool springs of nature's gospel. Revelation, realization, reality itself. And yet, even in the midst of so much sorrow, so many lies, and all the tortuous diversions which masquerade as life on this earthly plane, this currency exists. Not in the great halls of learning, nor yet in the religious assemblies, neither in the chambers of commerce, and certainly not in political forums, can we find this. But in the honest, plain-speaking, truth-seeking, love-sharing, light-bearing people who reject all forms of programmed obedience, knowingly or unknowingly, to the will of those below. It is to these, even in these basic realms, that this currency shall come, and even they can't stop this now. So take heart, be renewed, for even when all around seem trapped in their prisons, fabricated from below, but accepted without question by them, know that this need not be so. Those prison bars can be broken, and this must be. Be prepared, for they will need a new home then, constructed from reality itself and purchased in the currency of truth.
Gosh, that's like a spiritual teaching, isn't it?
It's an amazing, beautiful thing. And just to sort of illustrate it, I must have received that in less than 5 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That was going to be my next question, actually.
Yeah.
How long did it take to receive that?
I am not capable of writing that in 5 minutes.
I'm
not capable of writing that, but not in 5 minutes.
Gosh.
And you'll see in there, actually, as I read it, I noticed quite a few reference to the lower realms. Mm-hmm. And this is the author of Inferno.
Yeah.
And of course, yes, it was, these are my opinions now, but it wasn't a complete depiction of what the lower astral realms are really like. And there was some dogma crept in. In fact, he even says in there, mea culpa, which again is not a phrase I use ever, but he says he's drunk from the poison. I mean, he also lived at a certain time when he wrote the Inferno. Yeah. But having said that, though, I think he showed there a compassion.
Yeah, he did.
In even bothering about people in lower realms and in hells and what they were going through or not going through, even entering that arena.
I see.
That's my view of it. But here you see quite a few references to, the prisons fabricated from below, for example. But they can be, but he doesn't say this, but demolished, transmuted, we would say.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one aspect of it that really stood out to me, actually, in what he said, is that it's almost like an inspiration, a call to arms. It's not just, it's all about what can we do about it. It is a call to arms for light bearing, light sharing. I think that's what he said, right?
I mean, the poem that's in God's Guides and Guardian Angels, which is, not about the higher realms or the lower ones, but the in-between ones.
Oh, yeah.
Is quite damning of the ordinariness and the lack of
that's his
vision.
poem, you mean?
And that's his. I don't cite him there. I kind of
see.
hinted at that, but that's just me being, overly modest, cautious.
Okay.
Call it what you like,
Yeah,
but it's
okay.
still not good enough. I should probably have said it, but I didn't then. But that was. I mean, I went to with some people near to Florence, and we were very near when I got it. Where he lived,
Wow.
where he operated.
Okay, yeah.
And I didn't think it at the time, but it was almost like I had to make that effort.
Yes, it's like a
maybe,
pilgrimage
to make
there,
that.
isn't it?
I didn't know it, and strange enough, the people we were with, the Blazes, Chris
Oh,
and
yeah.
Gary Blaze, Alison and I were sharing a little villa near Florence at the time on a holiday. Gary had got, unbeknown to me, a picture of Dante, and he had it there in the next room, and he came out and showed it to me. And
No, come on.
there were so many things like this. It was, you get a lot of synchronicity. So I think certainly I do on some of these things, which are way beyond coincidence.
But I think, in some, I mean, this is an incredible. I think that poem is evidence in and of itself. I think that's an incredible piece of literature.
Evidence of mediumship.
Yeah.
And not the usual thing you get, even with all greatest respect to it. And I'm very grateful to Psychic News for publishing this without any caveats whatsoever. But most of the things in there are more domestic. Let's put it that way. The communications. Yeah.
I'd love to bring the next two that we've got here, because we've still got two to share actually onto our next show next week.
Sounds good.
Everybody's Darren here. Thanks for tuning into the show. Now, if you enjoyed that episode, don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom from the 9 Freedoms. If you'd like to find out more about the 9 Freedoms, about Mars Sector 6 by Dr. George King, go to our website, that's aetherius.org. Richard and I love hearing from you, receiving your comments, your questions on your spiritual experiences, and talking about them on the show. So do write to us, share them with us at spiritualfreedom@richardlawrence.co.uk. Always remember that service is the jewel in the rock of attainment.